Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Happy day two. Happy day two of JNUC. Did everyone have fun last night? Did you go and do cool stuff in Denver? Okay, good. So, this morning we have AI-powered and human-activated, amplify secure user productivity with smarter Mac compliance. So please welcome to the stage, we've got Tommy and Shreyas from Amplify Security, and we have Nick from Oscar Health.
Thank you, folks. Good. Welcome, good morning, and welcome again to the Mile High City. I'm glad that you guys made it to this early morning session. I want to take a chance to introduce our speakers. Our first guest and a chief guest of honor is Nick Vigier, the CISO of Oscar Health, who's graced us here with his presence. Nick has led security and technology as a CISO at multiple iconic companies like Sony, ID.me, and Talend. And in there, he's actually built, matured, and scaled security programs with a modern approach. So you're going to hear more about that from Nick. And then my co-founder and CTO, Tommy Donnelly from Amplifier Security. Now, he himself has run IT and security as a CIO and a CISO multiple times in his career. And a lot of the best practices that he actually built internally with his teams and tools is what inspired us to build Amplifier. So thank you for being here, and we'll get started. That's right. So we have a lot to cover today. We hope that by the end of this session, you walk away with a lot of these insights. The first is, how do you actually harness the power of AI to secure your workforce? It's real, it's possible, it's tangible. So you're going to hear that as a real-life customer story from Oscar and how they actually amplified their employee security with the help of AI, with a very simple but powerful use case on accelerating Mac compliance, and how employees played a role as part of that, and how AI played a role as part of that. And we hope by the end of the session, you can achieve that with less toil for you as IT security teams, less work, and a great employee experience. So let's first look at the first topic on the role of AI in user security. As all of you know, end user security really breaks down at that last mile, right? Where employees have to take some type of action to close security gaps. If you look at all these typical use cases like, hey, missing tools, or patching OS updates or vulnerabilities, or for that matter, removing unapproved software, all of these have one thing in common. It relies on that employee to take that last step, right? Because that's just the nature of the problem, which is like you either have to allow the OS to be updated, or maybe automation runs that patch or OS update, but then you forgot to reboot the computer for that update to take effect. Or for that matter, there's an unapproved app that IT has detected, but then the employee wants to use it, but then wants to ask for an exception to actually keep it. That requires interaction, filing tickets and going back and forth with the employee. So this is nobody's fault. This is just life as usual. Life happens. You know, everybody's busy at work, and you get reminders and emails that get ignored. But the real thing is these risks keep building up, right? And all these pending actions actually don't get acted upon. That's when human risk builds up, and that's what opens the door to attacks and vulnerabilities that attackers love to exploit. Did my computer go through a reboot? Tommy, did you send a patch update? Oh, no, don't worry, nothing to freak out. It's actually part of the presentation. How many of you have experienced this interruption in the middle of a meeting? Like forced update, forced patch, forced reboot. How many of you like it? No one. Said no one ever, right? And why does this problem happen? That's because these tools, any tools that you have in your IT security stack, they don't really engage or interact with employees. They were never built to do that. They were actually meant to operate in the background. And that leads to two types of problems. One is a missed opportunity to communicate with the end user about the why behind the risk of not taking that action. Like if in that OS update, if somebody told the user saying, hey, by doing this, you're going to fix 20 vulnerabilities, that's going to improve the security posture of the company and help us meet compliance objectives. And that would be amazing for the employee to actually get motivated to take that action. And the second thing is the employee experience. It really breaks down because it never takes the user on the journey to automate and ask for approval and basically cooperate with them and collaborate with them, right? And that's the real gap that we're solving. in terms of the last mile problem. And frankly, that is the biggest issue in how security objectives fail, and they actually take longer to get accomplished. And that is where AI can actually help, right? So when we talk to all of you over the last 2 days, everybody said to us that, hey, I wish I had a lot more time to interact with employees, so it's a team bandwidth problem. And second, I wish I had the skills to engage with employees because I signed up for a technology job, not a people management job, and that's HR's role, right, to engage with employees. And so those two things are now feasible with AI. Imagine if you had AI with a model that's trained on every employee's profile. It understands the employee's outstanding gaps and risks. It understands the employee's role, job function, title. You're in sales, you're in finance. You need to have a different conversation based on their role, right? Because that engagement matters when you actually speak to them in their language and meet them where they work. And with AI, this is possible because now you can have an AI engineer on your team if you actually build that correctly, because then that can actually enable a conversation with the employees with a human-in-the-loop approach, right? Where you can actually engage the employee and actually interact with them and actually meet them and carry out that automation. And that is what we've built at Amplifier as the control plane that actually bridges the gap between your tools and your employees using AI. It activates that conversational layer using Gen AI to actually engage employees and have a conversation so that they can understand the why behind all their risks and take the right security actions, and makes it really easy. And that's how we can amplify the posture of every employee and amplify the posture of every company in the organization. So a little bit about Jamf and Amplifier. We'll have Tommy talk about the integration. But in case you're wondering about who Amplifier is and what is our relationship with Jamf, Amplifier is a cybersecurity software vendor. We are a venture-backed company, and we've been in the business for 2.5 years. And we are proud to be a Jamf technology partner, built a deep integration, and gone to market with this. And we have many customers using the product. So I'll pass it on to Tommy to talk more about the integration with Jamf and how all this works. Oops, sorry.
He meant to do that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology that was used to build Amplifier. We're combining two powerful technologies to make this possible. One is a data graph. So essentially, we have an integration layer. We're going to connect to every single tool in your stack, whether it's Okta, Identity, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. You can build your own integrations within our application. It's really easiest for us to add new integrations. So we're going to pull all this data and telemetry and signal from all these applications, and we're going to build a user-centric data graph. So it's a single source of truth for every single employee, and we can look and know which devices are assigned to that employee. We can know when there's problems with that devices. We can know when these users are doing risky things within certain softwares that we're integrated with. We can know when there's problems that they need to solve. And so we take all that telemetry, we know their role, we know what they do, we know what they're trying to achieve, and we can actually layer on an AI layer on top of that. And so all that signal pumps up, and AIs can actually take that and work with the individuals to actually resolve those issues. Sometimes it might be on coaching. So in the instance, somebody might share a file that has some company data in it. So in that case, we might just send them a security tip and say, like, hey, you really shouldn't do this. You should really pick the users that you want to share with the file with. Other times, maybe they share PII, where we want to coach them, but then we want to take it a step further and actually resolve the issue for them. But we always want to let them know, because that's what's going to build resiliency in your organization. If people don't know, they're not going to know what to do the next time. And you're going to be stuck in kind of this reactive mode. And so this is a picture of the data graph. So we're pulling all these tools together and all these identities in each of these tools, and we're pulling all together in one central place. So you can see we know the devices, we know what software is installed, we know when people are missing software, we know when software is going offline and it's not checking in. And that's a real-time view of what's going on with your organization. Every breach that I've ever been a part of as a CISO is usually like, hey, we had CrowdStrike installed, but it hasn't checked in 3 months. You know, especially if you're going through M&A. right? Then you don't know what's where. It's like, hey, they need to have Sentinel or they need to have CrowdStrike. They have to have at least one. This is going to give you a view of this, and you can sort and filter out to really see where your problem areas are and where you need to keep your data clean. Once all your tools are completely distributed across your entire organization, then you can start building signal and start having engagements with the end users to solve the problems. And so here's just a basic how we work with Jamf. We have some smart groups. We're going to pull the data from those smart groups, whether they're provided by the compliance modules or just smart groups that you create. And then you can actually design the conversations with the end users, and that's super powerful. As a CISO and CIO, when you start talking about automation, you quickly learn with security automation that you start kind of blocking productivity. And so you have this decision to make is like, hey, do I want to automate this? And do I want to make it secure? Or do I want to kind of let people use the tools that they need to use? And that's a horrible decision to make between, productivity and security. But if we have a conversation we understand, then we can remove those barriers. To where if people are using a new application, maybe we don't block it, but maybe we reach out to them and have a conversation. Are you using this for work? If you're not, let's help you uninstall it. But if you are using it for work, let's create a security ticket and let's have a conversation about how this can become a tool that we use as a company. So this is kind of shows you it's an omni-channel engagement, and that's important. We got to meet people where they work, whether it's Teams, whether it's Slack, whether it's email. So all this is built into the application. The integration with Jamf is super, super simple. You install credentials for Okta, your communications tools, and Jamf. We're going to ingest all that data, and we're just going to give you a list of smart groups. And all you have to do is click on the ones that you want to engage with, and that's going to enable you to start building out engagements to resolve problems, whether it's they need to update their Mac, whether it's like we need to remove some software, whether it's they need to do something on their device to ensure compliance. And so I'm going to show you, this is our engagement builder. And we're picking a smart group at the top. Underneath that with user cohorts, you can really see that you can get granular. Maybe you don't want to engage with certain groups of people within your organization, or maybe you want to have a different type of engagement with different departments. We pick a channel. We can basically, the second line on the automation is basically like, hey, we're going to schedule an automation, and we're going to connect to their calendar and say, here's times available for you to actually go fix this. We can set up how we want this to be communicated. It can be serious. It can be funny. If we do funny, you'll see memes and jokes. So it can be engaging in that way. We're setting up reminders. You can set up escalations to their managers after a certain amount of time if they don't respond. You can have expirations to where then we launch other actions. So everything that you're going to do to go and manage these tools 100% effectively, you can do within this application. And the results that we're getting from our customers are pretty astounding. Nick is going to talk about OS upgrades and getting standardization of OS upgrades. And we see people go from having 30 or 40 or 50 different OSs within their environment to single digits within a few weeks. And that not only has an impact on cybersecurity and getting rid of those vulnerabilities, but also has a huge impact on IT, right? And that, hey, we have less variability in our environments. We don't have these crazy edge cases where it was this crazy version of Mac OS 12 something and this software didn't jive. So you're standardizing the problems, and it really makes your environment a lot easier to manage. So I'm going to pass it off to the star of the show, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you, Tommy. I'm the CISO for Oscar Health, been with the company for a couple of years now. For those that don't know, Oscar Health is an Affordable Care Act insurer, publicly traded. About 2,500 people have been around for about 13 years. And we've always been cloud native, so very, we're all Mac and very digital forward, a little bit more like a health tech company. The thing with Amplifier that resonated is that, so Oscar's mindset is making healthcare affordable and within reach for people. And so the other side of it is then how do you engage with those people? So we've actually built a product called Campaign Builder, which is all about how we engage with our members to encourage them into healthy behaviors and to go and see their doctor and exercise and what have you and reward them. And Amplifier is very much the same thing except for your digital world within your organization. So it's like, oh, this makes sense. And so the result is really just trying to think of how do we share that journey with our employees so that they can be part of solving the problem. So for us, it's one, we're going to talk a little bit about standardizing around a Mac OS version and how we drive that activity. We've got Melvin here from our IT team who can speak to some of the pain that we've had in the past. But the other side of it is really about how we democratize that security, right? How do we make them understand? In a lot of instances, IT and security, we have a lot of knowledge, we understand a lot of things, but we don't communicate those then back out to the employees in a way that they can understand and they can be part of the journey. We're this like mythical, scary thing that they don't want to engage with, and all we do is yell at them, and it's a very negative experience, right? It's not anything that people want to be a part of. So how do we like turn that dynamic on its head and democratize that? And then the other side of it is really how do we start building a security culture, right? And a culture of security, and then a culture of wanting to be part of solving these problems. Being able to then engage with their curiosity, right? As people start to like understand more about their environment and why things matter, they start asking more questions, right? And that's where being able to then engage with our bot, the Ampy bot, and being able to go and ask questions and understand why allows us to engage with curiosity at scale, which we haven't been able to do before. There we go. All right, so first use case is really talking about the Mac endpoints. As Tommy mentioned, one of the challenges is really around, hey, you're still running a supported operating system version, you're still getting the patches, they're still doing the thing that they're being asked to do, which is to patch their machine when there's a security update. But they don't really understand because it's kind of buried in the menus that like, oh, but there's also this like really fun new version of Mac OS. And so, while there are the security implications to it, it's also about turning the narrative on its head about, it's not just security, but like, don't you want the new fun stuff too? And how do we educate them on that? And how do we draw them into this conversation, into this narrative? And so what usually happens is you find the list of machines that are out of date, and then you go and you create a distribution list, a BCC everybody, and go yell at them about not updating their thing, and then they ignore the email, and then nothing ever happens, right? And so it becomes this just a terrible game of poor communication, poor user experience, no empathy whatsoever, and you're not meeting anybody where they are. You're literally just beating them about the face and neck and hoping that they're eventually going to comply, which sucks. What we did with Amplifier was instead, and Tommy mentioned the smart groups, was leveraging those smart groups to target those engagements, right? So we went from really, how do we herd cats and try to get them into the box and get them to do the thing, and sometimes we get really upset with the cats because they really don't get what we're trying to accomplish, but we're gonna get them there eventually, maybe someday, right? And instead what we ended up with were these engagements, and we targeted them at certain times, being like, hey, what if we told them that like at 3 p.m. on Friday, we send them this engagement that says like, hey, why don't you just like cut out of work early and like update your machine, set it to update. It's gonna take a little bit. Go enjoy your weekend, go have a good time, right? And like those types of engagements to try to like drive some of that behavior and some of that activity became really useful in trying to, change the pattern of activity, change the pattern, right? Break the cycle. And then being able to have them ask a question of like, well, why do you want me to do this? Okay, well, here's a few reasons why. Here's exactly what you need to do in order to be able to accomplish this. And being able to then engage with that curiosity. You're always gonna get the people that are gonna completely ignore it, but this is just another way of starting the conversation and keeping the conversation going in a way that doesn't require me having like, a call bank that, of operators waiting to take your call to ask questions about why this thing matters. And what we saw was a real improvement. This required just sending those engagements, right? So that flat line at the top there is us banging our heads against the wall, trying to get people to do the thing, and no one ever listened. And you can actually see on the graph exactly when those engagements were being sent, because there is a pretty steep drop-off each time that engagement is sent, right? And then the next time the engagement is sent, the people that updated their machines aren't getting that engagement again. but the people that didn't are now getting some other funny little prompt or whatever to try to get them to take that action. So what this does is, again, from a security perspective, it's great to have consistent Mac OS versions. If we have to do forensics, things like that, everything is consistent. But there's also the benefit around troubleshooting a consistent environment is a lot easier than troubleshooting little snowflakes all over the place where everybody's got all kinds of different stuff. And we're very much about enabling our users to choose their own journey and have a good time. And so the result is having to meet that somewhere in the middle and being able to do that through engagement. So the result is we ended up with happier users, less firefighting. They ended up going in the direction that we needed them to go in without us having to get angry or upset. And I think the other side of it too is then being able to help people understand, right? So we as technologists are oftentimes trying to reverse engineer what happened on the system, right? Oh, I saw a weird thing. I'm going to go do hours of investigation to try to figure out if they were actually traveling or if they did this thing. And I'm going to build out a whole narrative in my brain, and I'm going to write it down, and then I'm going to go yell at the user because they did something stupid. That doesn't work. Why don't you just reach out to the user and ask them what they did? And give them the power and the information that you already have to allow them to identify if there's something inconsistent. So being able to give them a dashboard to be able to say where they are, like so they're meeting them in their browser, for example, of here's everything we know about you. Here are the machines that we know that you have. Here's the health of those systems and what they look like. And for them to be able to either action that or to be able to reach out and say, hey, I don't have that machine anymore. Is something broken with asset management? Is there something, a disconnect somewhere? Oh yeah, something went wrong. Let's go fix that. But we wouldn't know that otherwise unless we started going into some kind of like investigation or something on those lines. We have the opportunity to meet people where they are and have them use the knowledge they already have to make our lives easier instead of trying to figure out and reverse engineer what it is that they do. The other thing this does, and I think this is where we have our failure to communicate, is that we often have these SLAs in mind of oh, well, you need to patch this thing within this amount of time, or you need to take X, Y, and Z action, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the users often only find out about it after they're already in violation of that SLA. You've already disappointed me, right? But if we come to them and say, here's what I already know that you need to address, here are the things that need to be done, here's how you can do them and ask more questions if you want to, and here's when I need you to do them by. And then I'm also going to engage with you to remind you that these are things that we need you to do, right? And now we're setting expectations in a clear way that allows them to meet our expectations. Some of them will still disappoint us, but we're at least sharing information. We're communicating, right? None of the things that we do is like super secret squirrel that we can't go sharing this information, especially for someone's endpoint where they're the users of the endpoint. I want them to know. That way they can help. Right? And then being able to give them that dashboard and that scoring, and then eventually gamifying everything so that people can start understanding where they stand. What can I do to be better? Some people always want to be better and do better, but again, they need information. They need that, Fitbit, or they need that, they need to see those rings on their watch or on their phone or whatever, and go and try to close the rings, and they become super competitive. And then now you can start engaging with that type of curiosity, which becomes much more interesting and rewarding at scale. So at Oscar, the mindset's really around how do we think about creating a modern security program. And for me, a modern security program is a lot of what we've been describing, which is how do we turn this into a net positive? We can always run around putting locks on the doors and trying to make everything super secure and make everybody's life super painful. Or we can find ways of trying to engage and trying to figure out what drives people to want to do better. What allows them to, what can we do to empower them to help us and help us help them, right? And so what that turns into is then, how do we create culture, right? So we can create policies and rules and guidelines and lock systems down and all these things, but that's not culture. Those are just barriers. Those are I'm just going to pour concrete around you. Culture is how your organization adapts to the world around it, but doing it in a way that's consistent with what you want to achieve, right? So culture eats strategy for breakfast. Totally true. There are a lot of people that have said this apparently, and they've all been smarter than me. But it's what we're trying to drive from a security program perspective within Oscar. How do we get people to want to engage? How do we get people to ask questions? How do we get people to have fun with it to a certain degree, right? And then how do we show them how they're actually helping make things better? And that drives, that engagement with curiosity becomes really important. But then it turns into, going back to kind of that like Fitbit rings, model, is then building out a program where we're training people on habits and rhythms, right? So I'd like to use the example of like certificate rotation is always a favorite, right? We're gonna do this thing once every like 3 or 5 years, and when we have to do it, no one remembers how to do it, or who that person doesn't work here anymore, and oh my God, everybody stop what you're doing so we can go focus on this thing, right? Patching, same thing, it's all the same thing. But if we start thinking about things more as like a habit and rhythm, right, of this thing happens constantly now. It's just automatic. That patching just automatic. That certificate rotation just happens, right? Let's Encrypt was a fantastic example of that, where it went from I'm gonna rotate my TLS certificates every 3 years to it's gonna happen every 4 hours, and now I don't even think about renewals anymore, right? Oh, that certificate's compromised? Hey, guess what? In 4 hours it won't be valid anymore, right? You've now improve security, but you've also decreased your operational overhead, and you've introduced these habits and rhythms, right? And so everything we do within our security program is trying to think about what is the habit and rhythm that broke when this thing failed? Because that is what leads to resilience. Resilience is the conversation that everyone's starting to have now, right? Around how do we make things better? How do we actually make a failure more sustainable or have the business survive, right? I say that, we had Change Healthcare got breached, a year and a half ago. And the problem with Change Healthcare getting breached wasn't necessarily the loss of data itself. It was the fact that they couldn't get back online. They weren't resilient, right? These things happen, risk gets transferred, but if you can't get back online, you can't do business, right? And so resilience becomes a really important part of the conversation. So how do we influence those secure habits and rhythms? And it really comes into engagement, right? Meeting them where they are. We've built out a lot of, not just the AMPI bot, but we've also built out other bots and other means of being able to provide people with the information that they need in order to be able to move forward fast, right? But giving them that feedback, helping them understand, making it accurate, understandable, and up to date, right? And actionable. It's really, the worst thing you can do is to have data that's old and the person's like, I already did that. And now they're just getting frustrated. And now your NPS score is going down. We measure our NPS score within the organization, trying to make sure that people want to engage with us. People are promoters, right? And then really that just continuous improvement iteration. So how do we go and continue to make this better, to show them that it's getting better, right? But then also the back end of that is our toil goes down significantly. They're engaging, they're improving their systems, they're taking accountability and responsibility because we've shared information with them. We're engaging with their curiosity, right? And then, hey, maybe that becomes a recruiting tool. And now we end up with a more secure organization, a more resilient organization, and people that understand why. And I think that becomes a much more interesting conversation for security, and I think for IT teams as well. I'm gonna pass it back over to Shreyas to close us out.
All right, thank you, Nick. Hopefully that was insightful from a real-life customer story. For us, there's really 2 takeaways, right? There's this interesting puzzle that pretty much everybody in IT and security is trying to solve, and it's very hard to fit these 3 puzzle pieces together, which is how do I reduce risk in the workforce, but then do that with less toil, but also maintain employee experience. So hopefully that real-life customer story made this possible, that this is a reality now. You can actually achieve all these 3 things together with the use of AI and a modern approach that actually loops in and engages employees and makes them participate in their own security and health. This is basically one big takeaway that is a North Star for us, that we keep building the product to add more functionality in here. And frankly, that's where Jamf and Amplifier have actually collaborated and will continue collaborating over the years. The second narrative and the biggest takeaway for us, which acts as a North Star, is how do you actually treat employees as allies, right? How do you actually make cybersecurity a partnership inside the entire company? There's this thing in the industry that's employees and people are the weakest link in cybersecurity. No. If you start with that mindset, you're never going to actually solve that problem. As Nick said, a modern approach requires it to involve human engagement and where you actually empathize, share, communicate, and actually make employees part and participate in their own security, which in turn protects your entire company. And so we believe that employees can be the biggest assets and allies in cybersecurity, and that is the only way we can actually fight back with AI adversities, not with more technology and tools. So there is a way to control productivity and achieve employee experience, and you saw the AI studio where you can actually put a lot of guardrails and actually fancy options to escalate with employees if they don't take actions, and so our AI studio actually helps you accomplish that. So with that, we'll open up the floor for questions. I'm sure you have a lot of them. And we're open for questions. Maybe Nick and Tommy want to join me on the stage? Thank you.
Any questions from the room?
Questions to Nick, questions about our product, anything.
Yeah, so currently we have CrowdStrike in our environment where we have the vulnerability dashboard, so we have the telemetry to see, high, medium, low risk, third-party software, things like that. But we're currently struggling with that way to be able to get that into a ticket or into a way to share that. Is that Amplifier would be able to provide that, basically to capture that data, connect it with Jamf, and be able to create a ticket as well?
Well, two things. Let me answer the first question on CrowdStrike. So yes, we have a whole bunch of integrations. We can support CrowdStrike and bring that data in. And that's where our user risk graph, human risk graph, does that job of like mapping the data and mapping it to the user. Mm-hmm. Our mission is to actually eliminate tickets in the first place.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So where you don't need to have a ticket and you don't need to have a human agent to actually work on the ticket. How can you route that directly to the right owner to actually have that be solved?
Because then that would be sent to the user through the AMPI.
Exactly. The hard part is like trying to identify, hey, this CrowdStrike vulnerability, which machine does it belong to? That's fine. But then how do you reverse map it to say, which user do you need to engage?
Yeah.
And then how do you actually reach the user? And that's what our data graph that Tommy talked about actually solves.
Yeah. Okay. And if those issues aren't resolved or they're not responding to AMPI, you could then create an automation of our platform to create a ticket to deal with those exceptions.
Yeah, because we have CMDB from Jamf into Freshservice to connect the user to the asset. So then I would think that would be able to integrate with SOC 2?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
And we're actually doing that. So we use Tenable for scanning all of our laptops to find the unmanaged packages and libraries and things like that running on the machine. And we do engage directly with the users at that point to let them know, hey, this thing's out of date. And then they're able to then ask questions around like, well, where is that thing? Like they might have installed something with like Homebrew, right? Not being managed by a package manager, but it's there. And we're able to give them that information of exactly where that package is, and then they can then engage with the AMPI bot to learn more, understand more, like, oh, you gotta go run like a brew upgrade or whatever, and then they're empowered to go do that. Now you imagine that if your security team was trying to now chase them down, or your IT team to try to chase them down to then teach them how to do this and troubleshoot, like you're talking about hours, right?
And if they installed it from Brew, they likely know how to upgrade it, right? Like if you share that, hopefully. I mean,
they followed a wiki or a blog post somewhere.
Fair.
But it's
one would hope.
It's very effective from that perspective. Others were just drowning in those vulnerabilities and trying to figure out how we go and solve them. And I guess we'll just try to tackle the highest volume. It's like, no, we can actually figure out who are the people that engage the most with this and go get it done.
Perfect. Thank you.
One of our most popular engagements is engaging on third-party vulnerabilities that people installed, and really reaching out to a user and saying like, are you using this software? Because like if you're not, let's uninstall it for you. Absolutely. But if you are using it, here's how you actually run the updates and keep it updated.
Yeah, and then on that use case is where you can actually create tickets to ask for an exception. So we do have the facility to actually do that. Yeah, go ahead.
Mac OS only.
Oh, Support for macOS only? No, we support Windows as well. So first of all, we're an agentless platform, just to clarify. We don't sit on the endpoint with any agent, and neither do we have an agent on the server side. We're API-driven on the server side to connect to cloud tools, and on the endpoints, we're completely agnostic of the OS, right? So we do support Intune, Jamf, and any other endpoint management software that you
Contra,
have.
Teams. We don't just support Slack, so.
Yeah, and on the engagement side, it's Teams and Slack. Yeah. In fact, like on that point, we have a lot of customers who have a mixed environment of both Mac and Windows. That is always the case. So we support multiple OS platforms.
Hi, I had a question about a slide picture. It said incompleted training in device health. So if we have like a mandatory training for all our users to complete, and usually we use CrowdStrike to contain them if they haven't completed their training, instead of doing that and causing them problems throughout the day, does this app kind of tell them to kind of, hey, you need to complete this training by this day, if not,
Absolutely.
like, nudge them? And then can you explain a little bit how device health plays into?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, we support an ecosystem of security tools that we integrate with. We've built integrations for the most common security stack, so endpoint security, identity security, security awareness and training, regardless of whether you have an out-of-the-box security awareness tool like KnowBe4 or something in-house that you're using. We would integrate with that and bring them as security findings for any overdue or incomplete trainings. So when we do that, again, we map that to the right user, and then it adds up to that user's risk because they haven't finished the training, right? And so that's what shows up in their user security health dashboard and portal. And that's a proactive way of saying, hey, you have this overdue training. But then like Nick showed, we can actually build an engagement for training completion saying, hey, here's why it's important. You got to get this done in X number of days. And if you don't, then we will escalate to your manager. Or maybe we'll take a more punitive action that maybe will log you out of a resource that's important for you, right? So we can actually build that engagement and get that done.
Yeah, and all the escalations to their manager, that can all be handled through us. You can also upload your security policies into the engagement. So if they have questions about why am I doing this, here's our policy, here's why, that can be conversational also.
Yeah, and the important thing is that what you saw there in the dashboard that appears in a browser extension, the personal security portal, it's not just device health, right? As you can see, there's multiple aspects of a user security, inclusive of devices and their posture across their stack of tools.
Yeah, so for us, for example, we do our training through Litmos. We have that data feeding into Amplifier, and then the user sees it continuously in that Chrome extension, as opposed to just waiting for that, weekly or biweekly email yelling at them that they haven't done it yet, and again, beating them about the face and neck, and then eventually I'm going to take your toys away, and like just a horrible user experience in the old way of doing things, where I'm just going to turn the knobs I have, as opposed to engaging.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably experienced this because all of you have a security awareness tool. It's pretty dry, boring email reminders that
Fascinating.
Just get sent.
It's the best.
And you can see the experience in how Ampy will engage with a lot of color, memes, humor, emojis, just to entice the employee to take action.
And the memes are pre-filtered too, so they're not like just like rando memes coming off of Jiffy that
We've only got one complaint from one meme that we had to take out of the application. That's coming.
What's the speed to execution as far as getting Amplifier set up and then actually being able to start engaging with the employees from your experience?
The speed of setup.
Speed. Yeah, so you do a setup call. So we actually, I was an ex-CIO and a CISO, and one of the things that annoyed me was that people just like, here's all the documentation, have at it. So we will have we give you all the information to install it. It usually takes about 30 minutes to install all the keys and everything that we have. Then our system starts ingesting all that data, and it creates data insights. We'll schedule a call with your team for about an hour, and we'll basically, number one is we have our data analyst analyze that data and come back to you and say, like, here's what we're seeing. Do you know you had 35 operating systems? Do you know that you have 20 people that are missing CrowdStrike? Do you realize that you have some vulnerabilities that are over a year old, right? So we'll look at those and we'll define a business result that we want to achieve with you, right? Hey, I want to take our MTTR for solving vulnerabilities from 75 days down to 20, right? Or I want to take the training compliance from 75% to over 99%. Or I want to standardize on Mac OSs. I want to, so we'll define those goals and we'll then train you in that session on here's the best practice, here's the best way to see what's going on. And then we have one thing we've learned is then we have an easy way for you to test it with your team or yourself, get comfortable with it, and then you just turn it on. So it's really just 2 calls to basically ensure that we have everything going, and then you're off to the races.
Oh, got a mic over here.
sorry.
Just out of curiosity, is the communication primarily in English, or is there multi-language? And if so, the tone, is that localized in those other languages?
Yeah, we have support for international languages where the AI can actually help us configure that. And the tone is taken into account. Tom, you have some experience doing that, right?
Yeah, we've done French, Canadian, and English as customers, but we have the capability to change the language preference on.
You guys are offering a free year for JNUC attendees, right?
Yeah. The free offer that we announced yesterday is still active for JNUC attendees.
Yep.
And in case you guys missed the keynote yesterday, what he's referring to is compliance benchmarks, right? Compliance benchmarks is a big initiative. And so if you would like to use Amplifier with compliance benchmarks, then you can actually use that for no cost for a year, right? So we'll help you set it up, and we can actually get that running for you.
One other thing that's important that on the internationalization and the language barriers, the other thing that we do that's important is you're actually going to set up the hours that you want us to engage. And so we're going to figure out people's local time zones, and then we're only going to engage during those times, right? So if you don't want to engage with people on Friday, you can remove that. If you don't want to engage people before 10 o'clock, so based on your preferences and based on what the user's defined time zone on their computer is, we'll kind of dictate how those engagements happen also. So that's also important, kind of related.
One more question for you. So you mentioned browser extension was kind of the primary source as far as like constant, like, would that be like it would pop up for the user if there was some level of risk, or is it on the user to be able to like click into it to check on it?
It's the latter. So it's proactive for the user to go click on it.
Okay.
We have some ideas of making that pop up as an alert, but for now, today, it's proactive where you have to go as a user and click that.
Okay.
And that's optional, right? Where the primary mode is actually Slack or Teams,
Right.
where each employee gets engaged about their findings and risks and gaps. And then the browser extension is another modality for them to be proactively aware. But that's today, it's just click.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Anybody?
Regarding tone of the messaging, can that be geared towards like leadership, what tone for that, or department, like separate tone between each use case?
Monosyllabic for sales. Sorry for anybody that's in sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at that engagement builder, our AI studio that Tommy showed you, so you can pick different cohorts of users. And the purpose of doing that is then you can customize the tone there, saying, hey, we want to have a different tone for privileged employees or production employees or execs or different employees.
Yeah, so like a common message that people will ping me and say, this is cool, is a training message reminding the CEO to take the training, right? And so the message will actually say, hey, we know you're busy as the CEO. We need you to take the training compliance, but you're also the leader of this company, and it's important you to set the precedent and basically be the example for cybersecurity for the entire company, right? So it's taking that role, taking all that context of what they do. It knows they're busy. It knows that they're the leader of the company, and you need to set an example, and it's all rolled up into that.
Cool.
And if you're an engineer, it'll just say, like, you're probably not going to do this, but well, no, I'm kidding.
But I think the other thing in there too is that like our teams are not, this is like operationalizing psychological warfare to a certain degree. And so but our teams aren't really like nuanced in human behavior to a large extent, right? So it's really how do you make it easy to create those engagements where maybe your teams don't have that understanding that like tone matters, or how to talk to people. And so this is really like provides that benefit, especially from a leadership perspective, to give them, I have confidence that my team's going to build engagements that aren't going to go and like make people angry or upset or whatever, because it's being managed in a more strategic way, and I don't have to go approving all their messages.
All right, I think we're up for time.
Yes.
All right.
Great questions, room. And please give it up again for Shreyas, Tommy, and Nick.
And
If you have further questions for the group, they have a booth in the expo hall, Amplifier Security, so please go check them out.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.